You know that I know that they know that we know gun control is the single biggest losing issue for Democrats in 2020. Third wave feminism is cancer, and a league full of Scottie Pippens, while there'll never be another Scottie Pippen, and per special request, why fixing the labeling issue between NBA players and owners will cure racism forever. But it won't. I'm Will Inman, this is High in the Hills. Thanks for being with me as always, guys. Let's jump right into it. So with this most recent shooting, which everyone's aware of if you've been awake within the last 48 hours, there was a shooting in El Paso, Texas at a Walmart that essentially claimed the life of 20 people and injured 26 others. With that being said, our thoughts and prayers are with those people, with those individuals, with their families, and we pray that, whatever it is that they need in this time, that God will provide. With that being said, we have to talk about gun control yet again. It's a horrible thing, and the timing always comes this way because otherwise it's a bad ideal on its face. However, if you have emotion behind it, a national sympathy, whatever else that it is, it's a lot easier to make these provoking gun control arguments. But at the end of the day, there's simply no legislation against evil. A gun is not required. A semi-automatic handgun, whatever else, is not required in order to harm or kill an individual. Look at the World Trade Center bombing in 1993. Look at the World Trade Center in 2001. Look at the Oklahoma City bombing. Look at the rampant knife attacks going on in the UK right now. There's simply no legislation that weeds out evil in people. And it would be great if there were. It would be fantastic. But unfortunately, as long as man has a free will, a free thought process, etc., there's simply nothing that you can do to guarantee that violence ends. It's been in place since the beginning of time, and it's current today. And again, very unfortunate, just like when you wreck a bicycle. It sucks, but you can't put a law in place that says bicycles are not to be wrecked anymore. And again, on the legislation side of things, gun control doesn't hurt Johnny the robber. Gun control hurts Will the taxpayer. I'm the guy who has a gun with me that you'll never know about. You'll never see it. If you see that I have a weapon, then you're probably in a pretty bad situation, or you've put me into a situation where I feel that my or my family's life is in danger. At which point in time, I have zero reluctancy to open a permanent spot at your family's dinner table. But with that said, I will step down from my bicep-shaped soapbox and just simply look at the legislation of it. One of my favorite things to do to kind of frame this subject with when I'm having this discussion or debate with someone from the other side, or not necessarily from the other side, just someone who is pro-gun control, is to simply frame the subject with things that are currently criminalized in our society that are still prevalent in our society. A perfect example of that is marijuana. Me personally, I'm very pro marijuana, so I'm not someone who's personally offended by that or anything else. However, in my job, I field a lot of complaints. It's a big part of my day is, working with the public and fielding certain complaints. And one of the biggest ones that you hear is somebody smells marijuana. But that can't be the case because it's illegal in Kentucky, right? No, it's not right. It doesn't make any sense at all. It makes as much sense as gun control. It doesn't hurt the criminal. It hurts the taxpayer, the person who's entitled to a reasonable amount of self-defense and personal safety. And that's the bottom line. There's so much miseducation out there on the left as far as guns go that a lot of people are starting to see this issue being misrepresented like it actually is. One thing that absolutely drives me balls up the wall is the use of the word semi-automatic. Semi-automatic is a single trigger pull, single fire. You can get a shot out as quick as you can squeeze that trigger, but you're not going to hold it down and get this machine gun fire. machine gun type fire, rather. And that's just such a common narrative that's spun on the left at this point in time, and it's based purely out of ignorance. And I mean that in the vernacularly correct way. It's based in ignorance. As someone who has purchased several firearms in my life, I'm very familiar with the process. You don't run into a gun store to pick up a pistol like you would a pack of gum. If you're going in to buy a gun, you need to carve out a few minutes of time because there's going to be a background check. They're going to have your ID on file. There are things that are going to happen well before you put your hand on that firearm. Bottom line, there's no way around it. I've never encountered an exception to this in any capacity. I've purchased guns from gun stores. I've purchased guns from pawn shops. You know, I've went about it a couple of different ways. And just like the gun show loophole that the left loves to throw out, it's false. So operating with bad information, just under the assumption or with the hopes that nobody within your party is going to do the research and see the hypocrisy and lies in it, that's kind of the operating function of the left as far as gun control goes. In my personal beliefs, I think everybody's entitled to a reasonable amount of self-defense and safety. Now, this is as somebody who has a wife, a daughter, a mother, and a sister as, you know, essentially the most important people in my life. So, yeah, I want every single one of these women to have a pistol on them at all time. Another thing that I really want is for someone to tell me why I'm wrong about that. And I guess if I'm being honest on the subject, I have another request as well. And that's for someone to tell me, preferably someone from the left, to tell me why gun control was only an issue when we have a mass shooting reminder. Why don't we care about gun control when 300 people a week are getting gunned down in Chicago? Does it not matter that young black men are literally dropping off just crazy? There's no homicide numbers elsewhere in America that even compare. But I can understand why it's not a super prevalent talking point for the left, is because, you know, so many of those shootings are associated with illegal gun ownership, which really just debunks the whole gun control argument. Tell me why I'm wrong. Give me a moment, we'll come right back for some more. High in the Hills, this is Will Inman. Welcome back to the shack where the tracks are stacked as high as the hills and we keep it shaking like booty meat. Feminism is the problem and common sense is the solution. Why we should introduce the two before it's too late. So before we get into the subject of feminism, we'll go over a very brief history of kind of the movement and the growth. There's essentially been three waves of feminism that we're really familiar with. One from mid to late 60s, starting somewhere in that time. Another of which coming around the late 70s, early 80s. And then the third wave feminists that we live with currently began somewhere around 1990. Now, feminism is a lot like a movie series. The first wave was very necessary and good. The second was a little less necessary, but still brought a lot of positives and a lot of strong female characters to the forefront. And then the third is a shit fire. It's horrible. The third wave of feminism here has cultivated the myth of rape culture. They've really, really advanced the misplacement of young men in America, too. The masculine role of a man in America is essentially being phased out, and it's because we buy into these politically correct notions that women are somehow secondhand citizens, and that's simply not the case. A woman is entitled to every right that I, as a white Christian male, have. They're entitled to literally everything that I have, except also the ability to murder children via abortion without prosecution. So I really don't see where this inequality is coming from or why we're being fed this nonsense. If you're like me, most conservatives have a very, very strong fondness and love for women because we understand the distinguishments in role and other things. And I know firsthand that there are things, tiny sacrifices that my wife makes every single day to fulfill her role as a wife. And the same for me as a husband. Nobody wants to do the shit that husbands have to do. I don't want to go out here and, fix a part of the house that's broken or go out here and work on a car. I don't want to do those things. Nobody does. No, I'll take that back. Some people do. But they were never my strong suits. However, as the male leader of this household, head of household, it's my responsibility. So, again, you just roll with it. And as I was saying, most conservative males love women. There are mothers, there are sisters, there are daughters, there are wives, there are aunts. They may be your uncle these days. You never know. So therefore, it really irks me when someone from the left kind of paints conservatives in general as this oppressive group of, like beat your wife males. And that's horseshit. It's not the case. It's where we get this modern wave of feminism is brought out. Believe all women, Me Too, rape culture, things like that. And you see the downside of it too. We've already seen the downside of it. This third wave feminism isn't like fluoride in the water or some chemical that you take unknowingly that it's going to have ramifications in the future. Third wave feminism's ramifications are on full display. They're on stage. The flaws in that system, it's just not even relevant to say that they outweigh the positives because there's no real positives from it. If you're living a truly conservative lifestyle, then you're building up women in your life along the way. You're telling your wife that she's great, you're proud of her, you're happy with what she does, you're thankful for the sacrifices. You're telling your children that there's nothing that you can't be in this world. If you have hard work and dedication, you'll be successful. Because essentially there are 3 rules in America that ensure that you don't die in poverty, even if you're born into poverty. Don't have children out of wedlock, graduate high school, and get a job. If you follow those 3 rules in America, you essentially have a 2 to 3% chance of dying in poverty, even if you were born into poverty. So that's relevant, even though it's not painted that way. So again, as a conservative, it's always been my point of view that you really want to put your best foot forward and see the same from other people. If everybody in society is accountable and pulling in the same direction, it's really difficult to see us in this position, I think. I don't think you end up with like fake rape hoaxes as often. I don't think you end up with situations like Brett Kavanaugh as often. And maybe it's just me, but I don't see the upside of this third wave feminism. I think it's creating a culture of young women who are somehow feel that they're under the gun or at some kind of disadvantage, and it's simply not the case. You're not entitled to anything in this world. You have to get out and earn it, and you have the opportunities to do that as a woman in America. Bottom line, you can argue it if you would like, but at the end of the day, there's simply no right that is exclusive to me as a male that doesn't exist for a female on the other side. You really have to look deep, because if you focus just on what the media gives you on this subject, you're going to see that conservatives are trying to criminalize abortion, even though it is obviously a worthwhile discussion because it's essentially murder. You see that there's a wage gap for men and women, and it's simply not the case. The wage gap exists based on the fact that men and women are different creatures, despite what the world wants you to believe now. Women tend to take less risky jobs, take more time off for parenting. Women essentially oftentimes prioritize family and home life over work, as to where in a male's often predefined role, it's your job to go to work. So therefore, you do that. You don't get to take time off. If you have a child born, you're not going to miss 6 months of work for it or whatever else. And that's fine. Just acknowledge that there are differences and stop trying to hide behind the pay gap myth, the rape culture myth, the oppression myth. It doesn't exist. Tell me why I'm wrong. I'll be right back with you with some more evil truths right after this mean get fiddle riff. In the meantime, high in the hills, I'm Will Inman. Hey guys, welcome back, and like I mentioned in the opening here, I wanted to touch on something a little bit lighter, kind of the lighter side of life. I wanted to talk about Scottie Pippen and why he was such a unique player. Recently, I was just kind of thinking back, in a league now where a lot of players are kind of moving towards that Scottie Pippen prototype build and athleticism. You start to see more 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" guys with a huge wingspan that are quick and athletic and can, shoot the ball as well as defend. So it's a really prominent thing. A lot of wing guys are, taking a ton of three-pointers now. And Scottie Pippen, he didn't launch threes, but he was a small forward that can consistently knock down threes for you, as well as do anything else. Scottie Pippen was one of the most versatile players that was around during the 90s. He really showed you a little bit of everything. And then obviously you started seeing guys like Grant Hill, Tracy McGrady, and then it just goes on to where it's fairly common for guys to have a wide variety of skill sets now. But the thing that really stood out to me about Scottie Pippen was his willingness to play within a system to where he was never going to be looked at as the star. He didn't have any kind of complex with it, and maybe he did, but he didn't show it. He certainly didn't vocalize it as far as being, a sidekick, so to speak. He was a phenomenal player and could have gone out on his own so many times and, say, for example, been the head number one superstar on another team. But Scottie Pippen was willing to sacrifice that personal recognition, fame, whatever else it is, in order to be a part of a cohesive team, one of the greatest teams that has ever been assembled. And I just thought that was great, because nowadays you see so many guys who, if they're not in a position to where the recognition aligns with their egos, then they're not interested in being in that system. Guys will simply request to be traded, won't show up to camp, whatever else. There's a lot of tactics now that really makes you just think, people are so spoiled. Some people just truly don't understand the blessing and privilege that they've been given in life, or that they've earned in life. Not to take anything away from anyone. Again, these guys have dedicated their lives in most situations to being a physical specimen that allows them to do what they do at such a high level that the vast, vast, vast majority of people will never be anything close to that. But with that said, I guess it's easy to kind of get lost in the fame and whatever else comes with it. I don't know. It blows my mind, though. It really does. Just to kind of wrap up here with something a buddy of mine asked me to touch on. It was his penis. Kidding. The situation between players and owners in the NBA today. The entitlement, again, it kind of brings me to that because, as somebody who works and is a middle-class family or whatever else, we always make a note to be very appreciative of everything. Anything we have, you appreciate it. It's a great opportunity for you to have whatever it is, whether it be a place to live, a car to drive, a job to go to, etc. So if I'm not really careful, it's easy for me to just kind of get caught up in the common man thinking pattern of being like, hey, how dare you? You're a millionaire for playing a game for a living. It's very easy to fall into that kind of thinking. But if you go a little bit deeper than that, on the owners-players situation, it's really just the free market. It's a shining endorsement of the free market. First off, professional sports. The fact that we are in a situation to where people can spend hundreds of dollars to patronize these events and therefore allow these players to entertain us and make millions of dollars in the process. So it's easy to get bogged down in that and think that people are just ungrateful and entitled. As far as what I was saying, as far as this pertaining to the open market, first off, they could, my job could change my title to ass eater tomorrow, and if they paid me an eighth of what an NBA player makes, then I'm content with that. So title isn't super important to me, but I could see how it might ruffle some feathers. End of the story on this one is very, very simple, very, very straightforward. This is the open market. This is the free market. This is what you chose to do. Nobody put a gun to your head and said, you better take this position as a basketball player. No. And as far as the owner, I mean, really, we're trying to skew terminology here. That's what it is. If I paid for a truck, I am the owner of that truck. If you accept a job that I'm paying you for, then you accept the title and responsibilities and compensation that come with that job. This is the free market. If we're really just trying to change the definition of things, then admit it and let that be the case. But the fact that a guy who owns a team is referred to as the owner of a team is not racism. Believe it or not, there are things that happen in America that are not predicated on hatred. I know it's crazy to think about, but it's true. There are certain things that happen in life that aren't racially predicated, that aren't sexually predicated, that aren't in any way based on anything specific about an individual. Things can just happen. Things can just be. If someone has a white car, that's not a sign of oppression. If someone is proud to be a strong black woman, that should not be racism towards me as a white male. There are some things that happen in life that, again, are not predicated on anything racial or anything that is hate-related in any way. And realistically, until we open our eyes to the fact that most people, the vast majority of people, I feel, don't hate other people or don't feel in charge or somehow superior to another group of people. I don't know. Until we can see that as a whole, I don't think we're ever going to make any forward progress. So in the meantime, let's just hope that America gets a thicker skin back and, just kind of ride it out in the short term, I guess. There's really no potential upside in the NBA for this because either way it goes, they're going to look like they're catering to some kind of social justice warrior cause, or if they buck on it, then it's going to come off as some kind of brutally insensitive Donald Sterling reincarnated type of thing. And it's unfortunate for them either way it goes, because at the end of the day, when I pop TNT on, I want to see some basketball. I'm not concerned about the politics behind it. And unfortunately, ESPN, any kind of sports channel really, but ESPN bombards you with social garbage. So I don't see any real upswing here for the NBA. Best case scenario for them is that the topic just kind of goes by the wayside and people continue to watch basketball and enjoy it. Otherwise, there's inevitably going to be some kind of backlash for the NBA, who realistically was an innocent bystander in this. But in the meantime, I appreciate you stopping in. High in the Hills, this is Will Inman. Have a great rest of the day.